Hello, everybody, again. This is Tim Adams, and we are going to be talking about presentation software this week. This has been kind of a hot topic in the church tech community on Google+, and I want to thank, I believe it was Daniel Mandrick, who made the suggestion to actually do a hangout on this very topic because we'd had two or three different posts asking essentially the same thing. What presentation software should I use? And the overarching theme that we're going to be going for in our discussion is, it's a toolbox. You need to find what works best for you. But having said that, the context that this whole discussion is going to be kind of set in is that it's all about capability. And you've got to know not only what are your capabilities now, but what are they going to be, 2 years down the road? Because a lot of these presentation software solutions, they do cost some money. And for some of the smaller churches, they may look at that and go, whoa, well, that's way outside our budget. It has to do with what does the church need and now, and what are they going to need in the future? And if you can present that to the church, in my opinion, then you get what you need, regardless of money. If you don't have the money for it, you save up for it, just like any good purchase. But with that being said, we're going to start with the most ubiquitous software packages, presentation software packages in the world, and that is PowerPoint and Keynote. These are kind of what everybody starts with, obviously, and I'd actually like to ask Paul to chime in here and kind of lead us off. What are the limitations using those particular pieces of software in a worship environment?
Yeah, so there are situations where you can use PowerPoint or Keynote perfectly fine in church, but difficult if you don't have everything. Now there are some denominations, some churches that are very planned and regimented in everything that they're going to do, and what everything is going to be, and so they can, and then it's just hit the space button over and over again at the appropriate time. It's not all that difficult. There are, on the spectrum, there are churches, and I'm not saying the first isn't, it's just, how that's the way it's characterized, where you don't know from one moment to the next what's going to happen. Most churches tend to be somewhere in the middle, where maybe normally you know what's going to happen and sometimes things change a little bit, or there's a lot of that you don't know, or there's a little bit that's planned. There's some range of it. And for PowerPoint, Keynote, even Google Office's presentation software, or Open Office's presentation software, they're all designed to be linear. So you just go through it in a linear fashion. Kind of do some skipping around, but it's really kind of a kludge as opposed to the normal stuff, as opposed to worship software, which is that either the Holy Spirit is sometimes going to get in control of the service and change everything, and sometimes the worship leader is just going to forget and repeat a chorus twice when he or she only meant to repeat it once. Either way, the result's the same, that you have a lot more flexibility with the more business-oriented software. So in my mind is how quickly you can adapt. If everything's regimented and you've got a license for PowerPoint, by all means use that. You can do you quite a lot. But the moment that the moment that you get a word one way or the other that something has changed, a song has been replaced, etc., you're going to really wish that you had worship software where you could add a song on the fly or repeat a chorus on the fly or what have you.
Okay, Tim, I think you asked me to kind of speak next because I guess our church being small and kind of just getting started on some of this stuff, we've kind of made the next progression. We started out kind of with PowerPoint for the most part, and that worked for our needs for a while, but the biggest thing that drove us away from PowerPoint was putting scriptures on the screen. And like Paul was saying, a lot of times you don't get, should I say, sermon notes from the pastor ahead of time or any kind of notes in any shape, form, or fashion to go by, so you kind of have to go with the fly and become kind of a quick draw with Bible verses. And with worship software, that really comes in handy. So the product that we're currently using is Easy Slides. It's a free solution out there available, and it's good for putting lyrics on the screen for songs and scripture verses and stuff, and does a very good job of that. But beyond that, it kind of has its limitations. So for a free introductory package, it's good to start out with. However, the one that's kind of come on the scene since then that seems to be more popular is OpenLP, and it's something that we'd probably like to progress to at some time because being a small church, everything we look for has got to be free or pretty close to it. So yeah, Easy Slides is pretty good for our needs, but like I say, if we had to do it over again, I probably would have tried OpenLP from the get-go. And I'll let somebody else kind of chime in if they've got experience on OpenLP so that they can kind of sing its praises as far as the next level.
Excellent, excellent. So what I've done here is obviously a screen share, and we are on SongShow Plus. We're not going to spend a lot of time here. I just wanted, to kind of go through some of the options here. Easy Slides. This is the one that Charles is currently using, and again, it's a free option, but as he said, it does, have its limitations. And then the next one over, OpenLP, is the one that he referenced as far as where they'd like to go to. Now, inside of our church tech community, kind of where this discussion got going, there have been a fair amount of comments from people involving or referencing OpenLP. And one of the biggest draws that people like about it is this Android app integration. And essentially what that means is you can go to the the Google Play Store. I'm an iOS guy, so the Android version of the App Store, and you can download a remote for OpenLP, put it on your Android device, be it a smartphone or a tablet, and you can actually trigger slides remotely. You don't have to be at the computer. You can be out in the audience. You can be up on stage, and that is a huge benefit that a lot of other platforms don't really offer, at least for the Android market. Pretty much everybody likes to go onto iOS. They get on the iPhone, the iPad, the iPod, and that seems to be kind of a given. However, Android does own a section of the market for mobile devices and smartphones, and that should not be ignored. I don't agree that you should only release it on iOS and just kind of put the Android market out in the cold. Say, well, sorry, but the majority of the market is here, so we're going to focus our efforts there. If you're going to do one for the other, or do an app for one side, you should do it for the other. That's just my personal opinion. Now, there are other options out there that I've got pulled up, and we will get to that. But I think it's important to once again emphasize you really have to ask yourself, is this right for me? And you're only going to know that if you actually dig into the feature set. You know, what are the features of these different programs? And asking not only yourself, but ask your leadership, ask the rest of your tech team, ask your worship team in particular, what do they see as needing? You know, what is it that they would like to have as far as capability? And it's very important to have those conversations because Paul was referencing a story, and I'll let him tell this, where a purchase decision was made and a piece of software was obtained, and it just didn't work out very good at all. So, Paul, why don't you relay that story to us in a lot more detail than my brief summary did?
Yeah. We used to have someone who was on staff. He was a video director. This would have been fine if he was the one using the software, but he was leading the team but not actually using it, and he didn't take any input from anyone else on what software to choose when we switched from doing all of our stuff with PC to doing it on a Mac. And so he chose a piece of software that at the time was one of the choices, and it worked okay, but the user interface for editing songs, it was really edit dialogue running the lyrics. So it was difficult to run lyrics because you could accidentally go into edit mode and accidentally edit the slide while you were thinking that you were putting it up, and then getting back out of that wasn't particularly easy. It also bugged me that, in my mind, a bare minimum worship software has to have outline text, a stroke, the text for us to drop shadow. PowerPoint, that's a fine introductory way to go, but really, because you never know what sort of background image or video you're going to put behind the lyrics, text with a black outline or vice versa, and then it will always pop out. So this didn't have that, and so it was really annoying that in my opinion, some of the bare basic pieces of things that you needed, a good user interface and outline text of some sort, text of chav. So I think that that's kind of a rookie mistake, is deciding on something without talking to the people that actually use it.
Yeah, sorry. I was looking over some features here, and let me get that off of there. Yeah, couldn't agree with you more, buddy. It is so important to not only read through the feature set, but also talk with people that actually use it regularly, because that kind of feedback is only going to be helpful within reason. You know, it helps to understand that, you know, if the person is just a cynical person and that's all they do is find the negatives in every situation or with every experience, take it with a grain of salt, right? But by and large, if they have a problem with the software and you say, hey, we're thinking about getting this, what's been your experience? They're going to tell you, because the last thing they want to do, unless they for some reason don't like you, the last thing they want to do is share the headache that they've been having And so, in a way, I guess they kind of live vicariously through you by warning you off, saying, no, 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 don't do this one. Go with this other one. So, Charles, you had a good thought a couple of seconds ago. So, why don't, as far as how you evaluate one piece of software over the other, so why don't you take it away?
Yeah, this is I guess the IT guy in me kind of speaking. Um, with all these different available pieces of software that are out there, it's always best to, see if they offer a free demo. Get the free demo, run it through its paces. But, don't run it on its paces on just one computer. Like in my case, my computer at the house, I build it myself. I've got super good parts in it, so my machine is super fast. So I may get a piece of worship software, the free demo, try it out, works great. Take it to the church, which is a 6-year-old computer that we really need to replace, but we can't afford to at the moment. And that software package may barely even launch. So, a good thing to do when you're looking at these different software packages is, make sure they got a free demo. If they don't have a free demo and they're wanting you to pay hundreds of dollars up front, and there's not a lot of reviews on the internet, it's kind of like, do I really want to go with that? But if they've got a free demo, 30 days, seems to be a typical time frame. Yeah, it may cost hundreds of dollars, but they give you 30 days to try it out. The system requirements, that's my tech speaking, the system requirements show that it'll run on a fairly low-grade computer, and that's probably the one you want to go with. But, if it's hundreds of dollars and requires a high-grade computer, then, you're going to have your limitations there. And that's part of the reason why we're still kind of running easy slides is because it doesn't require a very powerful computer to run. And once you get into doing, say, song lyrics with a video background, sometimes you have to have a pretty hefty computer to handle that. And right now we don't have that. So if we had one of these other software packages and tried to do a video behind the lyrics, the video would be stuttery. So just something to consider when you're evaluating packages. Everybody's going to have their favorite, but find the one that's favorite to you by making sure they've got a free demo and check the system requirements. But if you don't understand them, get the demo anyway and see if it crashes.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. And you actually bring up a good point. I want to dovetail off of your comment in that when you're evaluating a piece of software, I shouldn't say very often, but sometimes what's going to happen is your TCO, your total cost of ownership, is actually going to be much more expensive than the price tag of the software, because the hardware that you have may not be powerful enough, as Charles was saying, to actually run that software. And so you're actually going to have to get a new computer to run the software. And so when you're evaluating what you need, you got to factor that in. You got to look at the total cost for getting that software up and running. And as we move on, into some of the more complex and powerful software options out there, depending on, again, what you want to do with it, there are ancillary and secondary costs in addition to the software in terms of hardware. If you want multi-screen capability, being able to send different content to different screens, that's a real cost. You have to pay for that hardware. It doesn't just come packaged with it. And it's very important that not only you get informed and educated about what those costs are going to be, but also the people with the money, the finance committee, the church board, your tech team, anybody that's going to be involved with this process needs to know that information. And the more upfront and honest you are about that from the very beginning, the better off you're going to be, in my opinion. Before I go back to Paul, I did want to hop on the screen share one more time here, and I'm going to do this. We're going to move on to Proclaim, and what I look for when I'm evaluating different software options is I look at what's different. And when you're evaluating as many options as there are in terms of presentation software solutions, it's very helpful for me to actually just do a spreadsheet to keep track of all the differences. Because I haven't actually looked, but I don't think that there's a tool out there on the internet that actually allows you to compare and contrast every option. And so I decide what the options are that I'm looking for, that I need, and then I find the software packages that provide that, and then I do a side-by-side comparison. And I wanted to point out this particular feature, and that is you pay for a single on-air license with Proclaim, and you can install it on as many computers as you want. That's something that's not very common in my experience. Most of the software packages, at least as far as I'm aware, if you are going to be actively using the software on different computers, and what I mean by that is if you're actually going to be sending signal out to be projected or presented in a live environment. If you're doing that, you're going to have to pay for each license. Okay, so if you have two computers, one for the youth and one for the main sanctuary or auditorium, and they're being used simultaneously, that's two licenses. So this is a very unique feature set that that I haven't seen, and it is kind of cool, and I just wanted to point that out. Charles, I'm actually going to jump back to you because you are just lighting up the chat right now. So take it away.
Yeah. I just thought of some other things while you were talking there, dovetailing off of yours. One thing about Proclaim is, I guess a good way to phrase its licensing model is it's software as a service, or the acronym kind of thrown around as SaaS. But that seems to be a very popular licensing model now. I mean, even look at Microsoft Office now. Office 365, that's basically software as a service now. You don't buy software, you subscribe to it. So I could foresee, Proclaim seems to be the first worship software out there that's going to that model. Tim says in the photo world, Adobe's moved to that model. I keep forgetting about Adobe, but yeah, they've done it too. I foresee, over time, Proclaim's kind of the forerunner of it, but if the other solutions don't go that route, Proclaim might outdo some of them from purely a cost perspective. Because sometimes the subscription model, especially when it means you get the latest version at no cost, you're always current with the latest version. I mean, it's very appealing. So that's something to consider there. Another thing to consider when you're looking at solutions, it's probably not so much of a solution for small churches, but for larger churches, some of these worship software packages, I can't remember which one because it's been a while since I did my last evaluation of it, but some of them out there actually not only have, like what we were saying earlier with OpenLP, where you can do a remote control, where you can have somebody back in the sound room, manning the board and the camera, and you're out in the pew, controlling the slides. There's also the capability with some of these packages where you can use a tablet or a phone as a lyrics monitor. So, no more buying, another expensive projector TV and all the cabling that goes with it just to get a lyrics monitor. You can just, have whoever's singing or playing an instrument use their tablet or use their phone as a lyrics monitor. So that's a very attractive feature for a lot of larger churches these days. So just some thoughts that popped into my brain.
Well, I appreciate that. That's why we do this. No one person has all the answers, and collectively we don't have all the answers. But hopefully, we can provide some good information to those people out there. And what we're doing here, let's be honest, we're doing top level stuff. We're talking about top level features and that kind of thing. But that's where you start. You gotta, again, you just gotta get to the point where you're like, okay, I need to be able to control the lyrics at least from a mobile device, from a remote. And okay, Keynote offers that, right? Okay. So what I would say is don't start with the most expensive and the most powerful software in your evaluation. Start with the least, and move up from there. Because if you can get PowerPoint or Keynote and that works for you, like my church, we use Keynote. I would like us to go to ProPresenter. We bought ProPresenter, but the pastors are used to making their slides in Keynote or PowerPoint. And yeah, ProPresenter has, an import feature for PowerPoint, but not for Keynote. It's just the unfortunate truth. So short of somebody taking it on every week and importing and creating or replicating slides, which, let's be honest, we're a mobile church, it's not going to happen. I don't have the time, and nobody else is going to do it. So Keynote, that's where we're staying. And of course, because I'm tangential, I have no idea what I was saying. But Paul, I'm going to come back to you, and maybe you can transition us into MediaShout.
Right. MediaShout is something that came out of a couple of really big ministries that you've probably heard of. Saddleback Church had something to do with it. Well, it might not have been the church itself, but someone that went there. And also Youth Specialties. And I happen to know that because our transformation pastor at my church worked with Youth Specialties before church. And so because of that, she was using MediaShout and just had no problems with it whatsoever. And I would say before ProPresenter entered the picture, MediaShout was probably the standard. And it's very powerful. It can do just about anything that you want. Personally, I don't like its user interface, but once you're used to it, you can do basically anything that you would want to do. So that's what MediaShout is and can do, and it's very, very powerful in what it does.
Great. Awesome. I actually didn't know that history, so see? That's why, as a group, we're smarter. So what I've done, obviously, screen share again. But if you look, one purchased 3 computers, so it looks like even MediaShout has kind of jumped on this bandwagon of saying, hey, you know what? This is what our users are asking for, and so this is what we're going to give them. So you buy it once, and you can put it and use it on 3 computers at a time, so that's pretty cool. And, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but this is the first one that we've come across that actually had integration with CCLI's Song Select. So what that is, how can I put this? Well, let me scroll back down here. And, all right, it's actually up here. So what that means, here we go. So they have included lyrics to 600 songs, just straight out of the box. You can, click it, put it in, you're done. You don't have to actually type it in. But Song Select, they have a library of 100,000 songs. That's pretty darn cool. And CCLI, if you're not familiar with it, is a music licensing service that allows you to, well, CVLI is the video version, but it allows you to actually legally perform copyrighted songs or copywritten songs in your worship service, and they even offer a solution now to record and stream those worship services. So when you're looking at a potential fine from the FBI, who is the entity that investigates copyright infringement, potential fines of up to $250,000 per infringement, and or up to 5 years in prison per infringement. And if you take that seriously, you arrive pretty quickly at the decision to just not do music at all, which is unfortunate because that is a good part of the worship service that a lot of people, particularly those that can't come to church because they're sick or they're traveling, it's part of the service that they enjoy, and not being able to include that is an unfortunate situation. But CCLI does allow you to get around that, not really around it, but to do it legally, instead of kind of hoping that you fly under the radar. So with that being said, that was obviously one of the other features. Here's stage mirroring, so you can mirror your main display on a cue-by-cue basis to the stage monitor. Okay, so this would be what some people call stage display. We've got a video engine. There you go, Paul. A new user interface. So maybe they heard you complaining, or heard your comments. So I mean, there's some pretty powerful features in here, and it's probably definitely worth looking at if you need something a little more powerful than, say, Proclaim or OpenLP. Let's move on to Easy Worship. And here you go right off the bat. $3.99. That may seem like a lot, but it depends what your feature set needs to be. Paul, do you have any interesting historical background on Easy Worship or comments?
Well, you might guess that I Easy Worship. In fact, when we started the switch from PowerPoint to worship software, I tried everything that I could find out there and decided on Easy Worship. The Easy Worship 2009 is the last version. So you might do the math and realize that's 5 years ago. And it was the one I was using, and the problem that we ran into was that it was great for worship, but it wasn't great for sermon notes because it wanted to put everything in a more worship-looking format. So if you had two sentences, it would split them, center them, and my pastor didn't like that. He wanted it to look like text. So that was the problem we ran into, and that's why we switched to this other piece of software, and then eventually to ProPresenter. Easy Worship, I talked to their developers several years ago, so everything I'm about to say is probably changed, or it might have changed. We were right on the cusp of adding in video switchers and just taking the step from projector and computer to iMag and everything else, and I just was talking to them and said, not only do you need to fix the part of the software that we would use for putting up sermon notes, you really need to also that I could do alpha channel or something like that so that I can bring that into a professional switcher. And the guy that I talked to said, really? Do you think anyone would want that? Well, as we know now, apparently ProPresenter has proved that yes, someone does. They sell that. So I think that Easy Worship, at least it used to be just one guy working on it, job for just being himself, just one person himself, and the person, and and they've steadily grown, and they're software, but it's just, I think the initial for worship, and then churches started using it for sermon notes, and they weren't ready for that, and then they progressed, and version 2009 was pretty good, and now I believe they've just released in the last month or so the latest version of that, and so I think it might now potentially have some of the more modern features, like, or have coming, an iOS or Android app to control it and things like that. Because when you think about it, 2009 was about the time that the iPhone debuted. So before that, you just had Blackberries and Windows phones, and you wouldn't use those for controlling your worship software. So that's all happened since the previous version of Easy Worship came out.
Okay. Well, I certainly appreciate your comments, and as Paul said, that was back in 2009. Just browsing the feature list, it does seem like they have made considerable headway, and I do know that there are people out there that swear by Easy Worship. And this kind of gets into the same vein as the Mac versus PC argument. You've got extremists on both sides, or should we call them purists, that are just going to swear by whatever platform they are using and they like. I'm more independent than that. I prefer, I like the phrase, it's a toolbox. You find a tool that works for you, and you use it until it doesn't work anymore. And then you just you reevaluate, and it's like a hammer. If a particular hammer is not working for you anymore, you go and find one that will. Or you need a Phillips head screwdriver, and all you got is a flathead. So it's a tool. So get the right tool for what you need to do, and I think you're going to be well on your way. Well, the time has come to move on to Renewed Vision's Pro Presenter. And again, I don't want to say that this is the best of the best for you, but as far as capability, as far as feature set, as far as value for the money, I don't think you're going to find better. But again, make sure it's what you need. So on the left here, we have the feature set. And as you can tell, it's long and distinguished. So I am actually going to leave that up, and I'm just going to talk for a few minutes here. Just kind of give you an overview. What you can do with Pro Presenter, depending on the module. Pro Presenter is built on a layered system. So if you're familiar with Photoshop, you'll adapt very quickly to this concept. They have different layers that contains different content. And with the multi-screen module, you are able to choose which layers go to which outputs. Which, that's a feature or a capability that you would find on a high-end video switcher. They don't call them layers, they would be sources. If you're from the audio world, imagine a software solution mixed with hardware. You do need external hardware with it, but it's essentially an auxiliary output that you can send from the software to a dedicated output. So, examples. Let's say you have 3 projection screens plus a what we call a foldback monitor. So this would be like a, I don't know, 50-inch LCD screen that's down on the front row that has the lyrics and the sermon notes and that kind of thing. A stage display. And let's say that you want videos to play on the center larger screen, and on the side screens you want live video from your camera system. We call that IMAG, with lower thirds. Okay, so but the lower thirds are going to be the lyrics, and this is actually the exact scenario that came up in a group in Facebook that I'm part of. And there were all sorts of different comments about how to do this, and to boil it all down, you can send the slides layer to all 3 or to the center screen. You can send the props layer in ProPresenter, which is, it's kind of a weird catch-all layer that you can use. I set it up as a character generator for a live video system, for example, because it has built-in transparency. But you can send that layer to the side screens and to the center screen, and you can apply different templates, formatting templates, to each output for specific layers. So it's very capable of doing what needs to be done in most situations. In a lot of smaller churches, I would say it's probably overkill. But I know that Paul, when we talked about who was going to talk about what, he landed on ProPresenter pretty quickly. So I'm going to let him take over and dovetail off of what I have been talking about.
Yeah, I love ProPresenter 5. I've used ProPresenter 3, I've used ProPresenter 4, and I've used ProPresenter 5, and by far 5 is, there's no competition. When we were still on ProPresenter 3, I went to the Gurus of Tech conference back in February of 2011, I believe it was, and talked to one of their guys in there, and I said, ProPresenter feels to me like it was written by someone who did this job. And he told me, yes, that is in fact what happened. That's where ProPresenter 1 came from. And then people liked it, so he released ProPresenter 2 actually for sale, and then they've just steadily improved it. So it is software. One thing that I'm going to say this because when we had the site license for Easy Worship, so we could use it on as many computers as we wanted, but when we went to one license for it, and that became a problem because it had the same problem that you're talking about, where install it on all the computers you want, but you can't use it concurrently on system. Well, ProPresenter does have a site license, which basically costs the same as 2 licenses. In a children's service at the same time as the adult service, for example, it just makes sense to get the site license, because the moment you add a third service at the same time, or you add in another program, or maybe there's a small meeting, it just solves that problem. So one thing I do like about ProPresenter is there is a free trial that gives you everything, but there's also a demo mode where you can download it and use it like crazy, even using it to make your your order and all your lyrics and everything for the weekend at home, and then send that to church. And you don't need the full version to do that. Anyone can just download it. So I don't want to monopolize on everything that it can do, but suffice it to say, I'm a huge fan. I've combed through this software. There are still tons of features that I don't, because it's just that feature packed. But the ones that we use, I mean, there's a couple of things that I want ProPresenter 6 to do that it doesn't currently do, but ProPresenter 5 is just, oh, it's just incredible. And it's not cheap, but as a volunteer in my church, it really feels like the leadership need a tool to use that works this well. So that's my feeling on the matter.
Excellent, excellent. You may not want to go down through this list of features, but I just want to hit on a few because they're so specific. The first one I want to talk about is, and this is the only software that I know of that does this, you can actually do corner pinning. And what this means is, oftentimes when you're in a volunteer situation in church tech, you find volunteers that don't have the training, they don't have the knowledge to properly set up, aim, and kind of get a projector image perfectly aligned with this that it's pointing at. And this will allow you to customize your screen shape so that it matches the screen. So if you've ever worked with a projector, you understand this concept of keystoning. And that is to help alleviate issues with the projector not being perfectly aligned with the flat plane of the projection screen. Either it's too far left, or it's too far right, or it's too far below the screen, or it's too far above the screen, and that creates this kind of trapezoidal effect that is really quite distracting. And what this software will allow you to do is to modify it so that you get a perfectly square or perfectly rectangular, or basically a perfect image. I don't know of any other software in the world that will do that. And it does it, on the fly for whatever you're sending to that screen. And I mean, that's just incredible that a piece of software will do all its other stuff, but it'll give you that option. The other thing I want to talk about is Stage Display. Now this is what Stage Display looks like, okay? So if you have a foldback monitor or a projection screen at the rear of the church, this is what your screen would look like in ProPresenter. And so let me just break it down for you here. This is what's on the screen now. This is what's coming next on the screen. And this is a kind of a configuration window to tell the software what you want on the screen here. This is not normally here. So it is kind of blocking what's here on the screen normally. Up here you have a clock. Up here you have some kind of a timer. And what's really cool is that you can have, I think I used ProPresenter 4 when we got it originally at my former church, and we had 3 timers and I think 2 clocks capabilities. So I mean, that's just ridiculous. It gives you way more than you need. Down here we have a chord progression chart, or notes. So we're going from A, G, A. This looks like a countdown timer for the worship band. This is an area that you can send a message on the fly to whoever's on the stage at the time. So in this case, they're saying, tech is telling the musicians, the pastor's not ready, sing the verse and the chorus one more time. This is a feature set that, I mean, it's just amazing. And if you find that the backgrounds for the slides are too distracting for the people up on the stage, you can turn that off. They can just see the words. white on black. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. They do have a cloud capability, so you can save projects or presentations to the cloud, and you can. So if you're responsible for creating the presentation for that week, and for some reason you got to, let's say you got to fly across the country because one of your family members is, gravely ill, and you just didn't have a chance to mail it from your or to get it over to the church, right? You can actually take it with you on your laptop, and or you finish it before you leave, and then they can just go and get it from the cloud. I mean, it's just crazy what you can do. Those are some of the crazy things that you can do in ProPresenter. I don't want to hit on all of them. They've got their own remote. It is unfortunately iOS only. That is one of the drawbacks. You can either look at that and say, well, let's just get an iPod and we'll take care of it that way. Or, that may just be a killer for you. But it is easily one of the most powerful pieces of software that I have ever come across. And that's in any use that I have used software. That's from video editing, that's from Photoshop, Lightroom, After Effects, any piece of software. I think this thing will run circles around it as far as the variety of features that it has. Now, we spent a lot of time on ProPresenter, and I think that's probably because Paul and I like it. Well, okay, we love it.
Love it.
That's safe to say. From a third-party viewpoint, Charles, what are your thoughts, just kind of in summary, in terms of just presentation software? What are some takeaways that we can provide people that watch this?
I guess the biggest thing is, like you said, the deal is, start out looking at the free stuff, seeing what it can do for you, see what its limitations are, and when you hit a limitation and it's a satisfactory limitation, then go for it. Like, I'm going to kind of plug the one I use here, and I don't mean to plug it above anything else, but as an example here, Tim was kind of talking about how ProPresenter can do corner pinning. Actually, the free product we're using, Easy Slides, can do it as well. So I'm going to do a little screen share here and show a picture of our sanctuary. And I think it's showing up. It looks like it's showing up. Anyways, the reason I had to end up doing corner pinning was kind of out of an uh-oh in our church. Basically, if you see in the screen here, or in this picture here, the screen's right now on the left, but originally it was in the center. And it was basically in front of that stained glass where you could pull it down, up and down in front of the stained glass. Well, guess what you had to do every time we had to use the screen? You had to move the pulpit. So we did a remodel of our church in 2011, or sanctuary in 2011, and the people that were doing the remodeling were making a lot of changes, and unfortunately I was on the road that week, and they decided, hey, let's move the screen to the side. So they just did it. Didn't talk to me, didn't do anything. I got back to church the next week, and unfortunately I was upset, and I shouldn't have been. I should have been more, finding a solution to the problem and being upset and not being consulted. But in the end, I guess, what's the phrase we've used on here before? Necessity creation. I can't think of it. Tim, Paul, help me out here.
Necessity.
Bingo, you got it. So yeah, that was it. Necessity is the mother of invention. So with the screen being on the side, that kind of threw our, I'm going to throw out a technical term here, it threw our throw distance off. So due to that, when I went into the computer and picked one resolution, it didn't fill the screen. I picked another resolution, it went off the screen because of the throw distance. So I was like, how am I going to fix this problem? Well, sure enough, I dug around in Easy Slides, and Easy Slides, I forgot what their terminology for it was, but let's call it corner pinning since that's what we called it in ProPresenter. But it basically allows you to define the coordinates of what shows up on your screen. So right there on the picture that you see there, our projector is actually shooting off the screen. It's shooting a 16 by 9 image like you would be when you're watching a DVD. It's shooting off the screen, but I went into Easy Slides and cropped it down and made it fit into our screen. So that worked for us. Another thing that I did is going kind of back to earlier about system requirements and software is, you know, sometimes you'll find if you want to go to the really advanced software and your computer won't support it, like displaying videos. Sometimes displaying a simple video within some of this advanced software won't cope on an older computer. But there's a free video player out there called VLC that'll pretty much work on anything. It'll play any video, work on any computer, no matter how old it is. And VLC has the same corner pinning feature that you can dig around and do in it. So once again, with VLC, I did corner pinning, so when we show videos, it fills the screen properly without going over or under the screen. So I know I'm kind of tangenting here as well when we turn off my screen share. But when you're looking at all these features, you know, the corner pinning helps out if you had a projector that's, you know, maybe you come from a church where somebody mounted the projector and they didn't know what throw distance was and just threw it up on the ceiling and went, there it is. So corner pinning can bail you out of situations like that. So that's a good thing to look for. And like I say, just start from the cheap, work your way up to the most expensive, and find where that compromise is. You know, either it's a feature that you can't handle or your computer can't handle, and just draw the line there. And you know, when you get in these groups, try to do like we're doing here. Try not to show favoritism. I mean, different things work for different folks. I mean, even user interfaces. I haven't played with ProPresenter much, but the first thing I heard about when I heard ProPresenter and all these features is on the surface, it kind of sounds like information overload. So if you haven't done worship software at all ever, I can't comment on this. Maybe ProPresenter is not the first thing you need to learn. If it's got so many options, it might be complicated to learn. You may need something simpler. I mean, maybe start out on PowerPoint just from a learning perspective. But yeah, always start out small and grow. But when you do finally come to the point where you're going to cut the check, so to speak, you know, put out your dollars, do it where you're going to get the best feature set that you can possibly get. Don't shortchange yourself when you actually go to spend money.
Yeah, I agree. And before we go away from you, Charles, you had something to say about slide colors.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I kind of got off on the whole corner pinning thing. Let me put my screen share back up. Yeah, so color choice is also a key thing to keep in mind when you're setting up worship software. As you can see with our picture here again, we have a very, what I would call bright sanctuary, which is kind of the bane of existence of any projector. So when you're picking your slide design, regardless of what software you're using, even if you're using PowerPoint, I can't count how many times people have given me a PowerPoint presentation at the last minute and said, hey, I want to use this for, you know, our Bible study today. And they have dark background, dark text. And it makes it, I mean, it looks great on the computer screen when you're sitting in front of it looking at it, but people don't think when they're designing their slides, the situation you get in projection or in large rooms looking at things, the bigger the font and the lighter the text and the darker the background, the better off you are. So if you go with big font, light text, dark background, you're usually pretty good. And as you can see in this example, that's kind of what we settled on in Easy Worship when we set it up is, you know, I kind of picked a bluish background. I know you can't tell because it's kind of washed out with the picture, but I tried to pick a bluish background to kind of match the decor of the sanctuary, if you will. So that's a dark background. and white text. At first I tried like a yellow tint or that, but the white just really made it pop. So regardless of what software you go with, slide design as far as, you know, your color choices is very, very important.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm actually going to dovetail off of that, um, because yeah, this not okay. This is horrendous PowerPoint presentation design, um, because you know you need a cohesive color scheme, you know, a color strategy. So you need to know what works in your environment. Um, and let me actually get rid of that. And you know, at some point, you're going to understand, or you're going to learn, I should say, that sometimes it's just the projector's not bright enough, or the projector and screen combination is just not working. Um, and honestly, Charles, you've got a really tough room. I mean, that is a very tough room for projection, you know, without going crazy on firepower on a projector, which, you know, that gets up into the thousands of dollars for, you know, something with like a 8,000 lumen um, engine behind it. But yeah, I agree. Keep it simple. Learn what works, and just because you have access to every color under the sun in your slide design does not mean that you should use every color under the sun. Learn color theory. Look it up. Google that phrase, color theory. There are reasons why good, solid designs utilize certain colors. There's a lot of psychology behind color, and there are reasons why certain colors go together. There's complementary colors, there's split complementary colors. You know, these are things I had to learn in school, given my field of study. So learn what works, stay away from what doesn't. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Look and see what other people have done and learn from them. So Paul, I'm going to give you kind of the last word here. What are some takeaways for the good people watching?
Well, I think that I fought going to worship software for years because the church that I was learning from, they made everything in Photoshop and they put it all in PowerPoint, and they knew well in advance what everything was going to be. And then once we took the plunge, once we went into worship software, it's like the difference from going black and white to 1080p. I mean, it's that far of a leap. It's incredible when you're in a service that goes a little bit longer and the worship leader says, "Oh, and let's sing this other song," and no one had planned to sing the other song, and then you can get it in during the first verse. That's something you can't do with PowerPoint. When the I've even been in a situation where we had a last minute change and something happened, and the pastor was calling for something that was not there, and he called for it long enough that I made it and then showed it while it was there, while he was still talking about it. So this is the kind, whether it's OpenLP, Easy Slides, etc., all the way up to ProPresenter, which is remarkably intuitive. I know it doesn't sound like it could be, but it is. That's one reason that I'm such a huge fan of it. And I don't want to toot my own horn, but I've made 40 videos about it just because there's so much there. And the first two videos, you can figure out in 5 minutes. It's the other says, wouldn't it be nice if we could do thus and so, and so, put one video on top of the other, where the video on the top layer has transparency and it shows the background video, which is just, this software is made for us in the church. We get the dregs, the leftovers, it's good enough for churches, but worship software, it's written by people that want to serve Jesus. They want to help out in the kingdom, and the free stuff, and that is you've got good-hearted people that don't need to make money on it, so they're trying to help out smaller churches and under-resourced churches and such. And then there's stuff on the other end of the spectrum that competes with or some character generator stuff and everything in between. And you not to stick with PowerPoint or even Keynote or anything like that, unless you're really programmed out, really regimented, and no one ever forgets the lyrics to your songs, then in that case, by all means. But other than that, this is the perfect software for you and the struggles that you're having for your lyrics up there.
Excellent, excellent. Gentlemen, as always, a pleasure. It's good to have both of you back from your traveling and all that. And I do want to say that if you're thinking Paul looks a little different, he does. He got a haircut, and I'm going to box him here so you can see it.
Yes, I did in fact get a haircut.
And if you're wondering about that mark on his forehead, it was ninjas.
Ninjas.
Because he doesn't remember seeing anything or any of that. So you never know. What is that thing?
I don't know. That's a sonic screwdriver from Doctor Who.
Okay.
Yeah, you really need to watch Doctor Who. British science fiction. Don't start at the Ninth Doctor. It's been on and off for 50 years, quite literally. It's great stuff.
So I've heard. TARDIS forever. I know that much. Mm-hmm. All right, so that will wrap us up for this week. Next week, I think we're actually going to just hang out. Probably won't record that one. So there will be a gap. So for those of you diehards, if you have to have one of these every week, let me know. But I think we're just going to take next week off and just hang out as a community. So thank you for watching. Hopefully you got some good information. My takeaway is simply, I've been kind of beating a dead horse, but you got to know what the tool is that is right for you. And you're only going to do that by digging in and figuring out what the features are that you need now and in the future. At least, I would say go out 2 years. 5 years is probably a little much for something like this, but and it might even be good to start with something like OpenLP or Easy Slides with the plan to upgrade as the need arises. And the final thing that I want to say is, we can't talk about good stewardship enough. And if your needs best match OpenLP, but you feel that for whatever reason you need ProPresenter, I would argue that's poor stewardship, because if you don't need it, then why buy it? You may argue, oh, but it's got everything that we're going to need in the future. Okay, well, how far in the future? If it's 2 years out, I'd say that's a no-go. And, that may be a little harsh, but you know what? we don't always get the candy bar that we want when we're waiting in the grocery store line. Just saying. Or at least we shouldn't. All right, guys. Thanks again for joining us, and we will catch you next time.